I'm Brian Hiatt. This is Rolling Stone Music Now. So there's been no shortage of actors turned singers over the years, but some are a lot better than others. Kate Hudson is definitely in that category. Her new album, Glorious, due May 17th, is really impressive, and I had a great time talking to her about her adventures in music and more. Here's that conversation.
Baby, nothing but the truth will do. Call me crazy.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your album. Congratulations.
Thank you. That makes me so excited. It's crazy to put it out into the world. It's like happening. I'm so excited, and I just hope people enjoy it.
You've had a long career of putting things out in the world, but I would imagine this feels a little different than anything than acting and putting the movie out.
Oh my God. It's like a world of difference. It's so much. It's so different that there's also so much emotion attached to it and personal sort of obstacles to overcome to get here, that it feels like when we finished, when I finished and I knew it was done and everything was mastered and I was signing off on it, it was like having, when people say, oh, I give birth to a baby, it really felt that way. I was incredibly emotional for me. What was interesting was that I just didn't have any fear. Like it was like 2.5 years of going through the process of making the decision to say, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do this. I have to do this. And then by the time I finally had just said it's done, it was like, I did it. And the fear went away of what anyone would think, because it's just so personal. It's so honest for me, which I've never had that experience with anything creative.
Just guessing, it feels like what would account for the lack of fear is when someone is fully aligned with something that they really feel meant to do. There would be less fear.
Yeah. The irony of that is that with music, I've had so much fear, but that's again, like part of the personal obstacles for me was like, music was always my first love, like singing, writing, piano, even though I would never consider myself a classically trained anything, but the piano has always been like my happy place. And I've always been a campfire guitar player. Music is always my first love. And so all of that fear that was around me for like actually putting it out there I really didn't face that or think about that until COVID. Till the lockdown.
How did that work for you?
It's simple. When I was younger, I think a lot of people in the industry, when I was starting to come out as an actress, knew I was musical and would say, let's make a record. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I always felt not ready. I don't know why. When I was a lot younger, like 19, 20, I don't know why that was my response. I can't do this. At the time, it was like, I'm acting. That's my focus. I can't focus on that. I didn't want to, something was stopping me. And I wasn't like reflective enough at the time to really think about it until I got older. And then this sort of fear, and I would just say of like getting on stage or performing other people's music or doing something like that was like, I don't want to do it. No. And so I always said no. And then here I was in my house writing all this music. I have a full setup. I'm singing all the time. And I was like, why am I so hesitant with something I love more than anything? So then relationships break up. You start reflecting on all your shit. And music was just one of the biggest things in that. What is stopping me from the things I love the most, the thing I love the most? And it was always fear of rejection. And so when I think about my writing, it was like, if someone rejected that, I don't think I had the capacity to be ready for it. And it took a lot of therapeutic work for me to be like, I'm ready to be rejected. I can handle it now. But then when COVID happened, it was the lockdown. It was like, what am I doing? What is my life? What's going to happen if I die? This will be my great regret ever that I didn't allow myself to share music. And even if it's one person who loves it, it would mean so much to me. And that was it. So that for me was like, okay, it's time.
It's so interesting that the fear of rejection was so strong, even given how public your career has been in other areas, and that you were able to have movies watched by millions of people and get past that. But obviously there's something more personal, more special even to you about music.
Yeah. You can always blame someone else for a bad movie. If you're not directing it or producing it or writing it, or as an actor, you show up, you do the best you can. can. You work with, you hope that what you gave is going to turn out great in the editing room. And then sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it really doesn't. But you have that cushion of that wasn't my vision. It was someone else's. And for me, music is the opposite. And look, I've always been surrounded by music, my relationships, me, and then my relationships, and the men I fell in love with, the men I had babies with, were all musical people, right? And so I respectfully, as someone who really loves it and knows it and has lived inside of it so intimately, for me to do music is not, I could never be a recording artist that sings someone else's songs. I love doing covers. I'll sing anything, but as an artist, I feel like it means too much to me to not give it the attention and the focus that it deserves, because I just have too much respect for it as a whole. And so to commit myself to doing something like that was the most important thing for me. Like, how do I for me, it was like, this isn't just, oh, I'm going to take 6 weeks and hire a bunch of writers and make an album. To me, it was like, maybe I will one day. But for me, like, to give it the love back meant that I needed to invest the time. It's hard when you have a different kind of career.
Yeah. And you do a lot of things too. You have your entrepreneur stuff. You keep busy.
Yeah.
But you sang on film going back, I think, to the year 2000. I think in About Adam you sang, and then you sang in 9, and then you sang more recently in music. So you've had this thing that people really closely followed your career knew you could sing. How close did it come to those kind of music deals that you mentioned when you were earlier on? Were you in talks? Did you have a music manager? Like, how much did that ever happen back in the day?
No, there were just some really wonderful, very awesome producers at the time that were like, you need to get in the studio. And there was a particular like manager that was very much, come on. But it was an easy no for me at the time. It wasn't like something I was focused on in terms of like my voice as an artist, in terms of writing. I felt more like at the time when I was younger, I really wanted the opportunity in musicals to be like, sign me up for that. So I'd audition for everything. I was like, I've got this thing up my sleeve. Put me in coach. But the things that I really wanted, I never got. And then,
what was the biggest disappointment on that front?
Oh, I can't tell anybody those things, because then that always becomes what anyone clicks on, and I won't do it. It's too easy. But name any of them, it's like just anything that you would think that I could audition for, I probably did. And the thing is that it's like anything. We can be told this a million times, the cliche of at some point you have to make things happen, and you can't just sit around and wait for someone else to make it happen. And that I realized in all parts of my life very early on. Just, I guess it's maybe my personality. I don't know, whether it's producing movies, whether it's developing stories, whether it's creating businesses. But if you're not making it happen, no one else is going to show up and make it happen for you. And so instead of waiting for the next big musical, I might as well just do it myself.
Have you been writing songs this whole time, like since going back to your teenage years? Or?
Yeah, really shitty ones. So many shitty ones. I was thinking about that the other day, because I've got like this big bucket of like old recorders, and like over the years, just all the different recorders and things that I recorded stuff on. And I got batteries in one of them, and I was listening to it, and I was like, oh my God, like some of the stuff I'm like, oh, whoa, that could actually be really cool. But a lot of it is just, wow, that's just so bad. But yeah, I've been forever. My thing was I only ever did it alone. I never had anyone help me with like structure or focus in on, we're doing a project. We're going to make an album. And now here's the timeline, and we're going to get it done. And you need to go home, and here's the sketch. We figured out the sketch. We're happy with how it turned out, the sketch of the music. Now I got to sit with it, and I had to, get it finished. For me, it was always just in the air. And so the process of making the decision to actually make an album was a very different experience for me writing wise. And I couldn't have done it with someone better than Linda, because she's such a powerful energy and gets shit done. And because I'm similar, as we're both Aries, it is Aries season, that we like to move quick. So working with her And sitting in that circle with me, Linda, and Danny writing together was so different than anything I'd ever done. And it was nice to have someone nudge me to not get in my head too much and push through things and be bad. We're gonna have a lot of bad ideas until we get to the good ones. And so she was such a great writing partner for me. We wrote 26 songs in like 2.5 weeks. It was like really a great partnership.
How did the two of you come together on this?
She cold called me because she heard me singing on a charity Zoom during COVID. A friend of mine tore, he's a Stargate.
Oh yeah.
Our kids are in school together, and he asked if I would do this like acoustic version of Firework for a charity. And I was in that moment in my life where I was like, after the lockdown, was like, I'm just going to say yes. When he asked me to sing, I'm going to say yes. And so he called, I said yes. And then Linda heard it and just cold called me. And she was like, what the fuck? I didn't know you could sing like that. She goes, do you write music? And I go, yeah. She's come in the studio. And so I just went in and sang this amazing song that she wrote that I love. It didn't end up on this album. I'm hoping it might end up on another one. But she wrote this particular song. I came in, I sang it, and then she asked if I would want to do an album and just write. And I said, yeah. And so she really was the catalyst to being like, you'll regret not doing it.
Had you already made the emotional therapeutic breakthrough and then this kind of manifested itself? That's really interesting.
Yeah. I even got to the point where I was like, I even can pinpoint the moment in my life where the issue happened. Like I was able to actually completely figure out, oh my God, that's why it was like, that's why this has been so fucking hard for me.
I presume you want to keep that to yourself.
Yeah. In 10 years, I'll tell you. But yeah. And so then it was like more about just like getting confidence of singing more and not thinking about it. And I knew I've always wanted to make an album. It was just that. Yes, it was the manifestation of, I think that. And the right energy. Linda's she really is like a powerhouse. And I understand her. I think she really understands me like right away. And I think that's what made the writing so prolific when we were doing it. Not everybody's easy to understand. I don't think Linda is. I think she's a very beautifully complex person and with a lot of history. And she's such an amazing songwriter. It's wild. We wrote one song in 10 minutes, just the two of us. And that was like, what just happened? I feel like you don't get that very often.
Were the lyrics mostly yours? Is that how
They're all mine.
They're all yours? Yeah.
Yeah, that was like really important to me. Yeah. And the melody, phrasing, all of it. Like I couldn't make an album with other people's words. I also think I love writing lyrics. I love writing lyrics. Like if you go back in all my journals over the years, like there's like 1 million songs in there.
But this was all fresh. You didn't pull from your vast archive of unfinished stuff.
No, we made Linda was like, we're not going to bring anything. I did Fire and Never Made a Moment. I had written earlier, but very recent, and before writing with Linda. So those were 2 songs that I had written before we started writing.
The title track, Glorious, you really go for it vocally, and it reminds me of Adele, which is incredible. What do you remember about writing that and also just obviously going for it on the vocal?
Thanks. That's a huge compliment. I love that. That was the song Linda and I wrote in 10 minutes.
Wow.
We wrote that song in 10 minutes. And I remember with Glorious, when we were, as you do, you're writing and sketching the melody and it's coming, the process felt like channeling, and Glorious just was a word. It just came came out glorious. And I was like, oh my God. And Linda was like, yeah. And we finished the song. It was like we were in each other's heads. It was awesome. And I think too, I can relate that to like why I love to act. It's not, the whole thing isn't the thing. It's the moments when you hit a scene with someone and it's just everything goes away and it's just so it feels so good. It feels completely present. And that's the same thing for me writing music. Like it's just, you're so present in it. That's what I love about it. And Glorious, like every once in a while, like that was just one of those songs that was just like, it was like better than sex. You know what I mean? Like it was just so great. It was, yeah, it's like I guess the sort of purest form of creation when you can do something like that. It feels awesome. I feel like if someone called and said, hey, like, we want you to write a 90s inspired rock song, or hey, can you write a country like rock song? Then you go in with the intention of writing, but nothing on this album went in with any of those intentions. Went in just wanting to write what was energetically coming to us at the time. We came in without any intention, super pure, which was so nice. So Glorious was like, it was more like, oh, let's do a piano ballad. Let's get to the piano and, I don't know, write something beautiful. And that was the only intention that came from that. So the bigness of it, that sort of like orchestral, that came later.
You hit a lot of different genres, musical feels, but overall it feels organic and sometimes rootsy, and it's clearly an album made by someone who loves classic rock.
I do. I love classic rock. Yeah, I love classic rock. I love country. I love the reality is I love all kinds of music, but I love rock music and I love women in rock. I think it's like Linda Ronstadt. Like to me, like she's a rock star. She's my favorite rock star. Like growing up, Emmylou, Bonnie Raitt, Joni Mitchell, Pat Benatar, Cyndi Lauper. Like these women to me, like Time After Time is
amazing song. Yeah.
And Stevie Nicks. I'm not so sure that they were at that time of music that it was so clearly defined as, oh, you're rock or you're pop or you're alternative or you're prog rock or you're punk. There's so many boxes now. And because I think of streaming, everybody wants to fit into those boxes and be in the playlist. Like I did not enter this experience like that. I just wanted to write something that felt just pure for me. And I didn't want it to feel like a defined genre.
Right.
Lying to Myself feels like that song to me feels like a late 80s, early 90s kind of pop song. And Touch the Light to me is, I don't even know what that is. If someone said define that, I'd be like, I guess I'd put it in, I don't know, like I wanted that big, like shredding guitar solo. It feels expressive, maybe a little indie. I don't know where it sits. But then like Never Made a Moment is like rootsy and bluesy a little. But yeah, I love rock. I love rock. I love a good fucking riff too. And I honestly, like, I took away a lot of some of the heavier songs on the album. I have some songs that are a little bit more riff heavy because crafting this album with all the music that we had, there was 2 albums and I felt like this was the best entry point, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It might get wild and weird. We'll see.
We do start out with Gonna Find Out. Which is one of the more rocky songs on the album. And it does have that sort of Linda Ronstadt covering the Stones type vibe to it. And it's got the organ going and some great guitar playing. Yeah.
That's actually Joshua Gooch. Yeah. Danny produced it. He played guitar on some of it. But like that, like lead, that's Joshua Ray Gooch. And he's actually touring with me and working with me. He's so talented and a big part of the sound of the record, I think, the album. And Gonna Find Out is one of my favorite songs on the album. Like that to me is like the purest of like, I'm such a Stones girl. Like when people start talking about like, what are your, just give me like Emotional Rescue and give me Sticky Fingers in like my desert island is Exile on Main Street. I just everything about the Stones makes me happy. And there's so much freedom in their music. I just love it. And I know those guys well, and I love their whole thing. I love that they still get on stage in stadiums and like, are like, well, let's see what happens, you know? And I
totally
love that.
That is so true. There's that moment when you realize like, oh, there's still a garage band somehow.
Fuck yeah. Which is what makes them so great to watch every time. And I remember when I went in New Orleans to see them when Charlie was still with us. And I just remember watching them going, these guys fucking rock at like late 70s, 80s. Like, how is this happening? And it's because they're the coolest. I can't even. So Gonna Find Out to me, it gives me a little bit of that on the album. And
Someone's probably going to say it reminds them of the Black Crowes too. It's probably going to, it's going to happen.
Listen, talk about a foundation of my life. I was a fan of my ex-husband before I met him, as I was a lot. Allman Brothers and that whole kind of Southern rock. Jesus, Whipping Post was like the song of my childhood. So if you get into all of that, even like Government Mule and all those guys, like I just, that you come to my house and if you see me in my room, like I'm listening to a Chris Stapleton record. I remember what I loved about the Black Crowes when I was younger, before I fell in love with him, was again, like the naughtiness and the freedom in which they chose to create. And I have a soft spot for people like that, even though they're challenging and tough. And I really respect uncompromising artists. And I believe that the Black Crowes are. And yeah, Chris and we didn't fall in love because we liked opposite things. We fell in love because we were into the same shit. And yeah.
It's weird for people who are either in relationships with musicians or are in a band, but they're not the songwriter yet. It can have two effects of it can, if you have your own ambitions along those lines, it can intimidate you where you're like, that's their thing. I'm not going to sit here and write music. Or just seeing it happen can be like, oh, it's not so magical. Look, they're writing songs in the next room. I'm going to write a song in my room. Which way did it tend to go for you over the years as far as that aspect?
Both Chris and Matt, who are very different artists, and I have such respect for both of them and their artistry. They were so supportive of me as a musician and writing. They encouraged it. And it was me. It had nothing to do with that. There is an element of, I'm not so sure two musical artists on tour is great for family life. So like the adult thing is, this is great. We get to go on tour when I'm not making a movie, and when he's not on tour, I can go make a movie and we can all be together. And it was a very like blessed way to be artists. So there's also just the boring, unsexy logistics of life. But when it comes to like music, Chris and I, we sang together on stage sometimes. We would go do little things and sing together. And we made this like little record for Ryder together. Yeah, he was so supportive. And Matt too. Matt's like almost like my second manager. It's like, you should be doing this and you should go do that. And I feel really glad that those relationships are good and that they are supportive. So I think it was more like a logistical thing and more of my own need to have to figure out what was stopping me than it being like your world, not my world. I will say this.
Yeah.
When it comes to the outward media world wants to see relationships, and everybody's into the relationships. They love it. I get it. It's like clickbait. Great. Whatever. Been doing this a while. People always go, you really like those music guys. And I'm always like, they might like me too. There's something about music that I've been in relationships where I can't speak that language with someone. I can't speak the language of music. And I think it's a very specific thing. And I don't know if I could exist in a unit where I couldn't share it properly. I think there's the receivers of music. Like there's certain people who receive music like it's like burns in their soul, and they go to shows and they feel everything. And that's such a special thing to be given. And those people are amazing. And then there are the people who create it. And it's also very different than the receivers. And just because you're creating it doesn't mean you don't receive it. I think that's all. You're given that thing. You can't explain it to anyone. And it's a really nice thing to share. And I think for me, that's been why I always end up having babies with, it's like my pheromones are like, oh, we'll make a good child. We'll make a musical child. So let's do this. I think that's really like at the soul of it. I think it's why you see so many people, a lot of musicians with other musicians. And it's a funny thing when you're with somebody and you're trying to connect on something you love the most and it just doesn't register.
I was going to ask about touring. What are your thoughts about that?
I would love to tour. I can't wait. We've been thinking a lot about it. It's more, again, like a logistical thing. The touring is the whole reason why I want to do this. And when I say like music to me isn't just, it's the commitment to it. And I really want to connect the live. I I like that. I can't wait. And you know what? The band that I put together is so great. I can't wait. We have so much fun. And we did this cover. We were playing the other day. We did this cover of Vaseline. Like we were just like fucking around. And I was like, there is just nothing better than putting an amazing family of musicians together and creating cool stuff. So I can't wait to share all of that and see what that feels like for me. It's going to be like a totally new world. I'm a little afraid I'm going to talk a lot. You know, like I went and saw Adele in Vegas and I was like, oh, that's me. But she's so funny and you could just hear her. She's so charismatic. You just listen to her talk forever. But I'm like, oh my God, I can tell a story for weight. You can probably tell by this interview. Like I'll just keep talking. And so I have a feeling that when I get comfortable on stage, I'll do a lot of talking. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. But I really want to tour and I want to do an intimate one. Like there's just certain places in my life that I really want to play. Like I want to play certain venues and even just for the little kid in me, places like the Bowery Ballroom. Like I have to play the Bowery Ballroom and I got to play the Trube. I just can't wait to do that. And then there are certain theaters I can't wait to play at some point that I just remember sitting and watching shows going, I hope I get to play here someday. A lot of bucket lists there. I also have a couple Shed bucket lists where I'm like, ooh, I hope one day I get to go back and play that Shed.
Red Rocks or something.
Oh, the Gorge, Red Rocks, my two favorites. Red Rocks is magic. And my ultimate favorite is the Hollywood Bowl. Like, I just think that's one of the great venues of all time. I never have a bad night. I've never not enjoyed a night at the Hollywood Bowl.
One thing I've noticed is that, and I'm sure you've noticed too, it feels like music biopics are becoming the new superhero movies. Like there are so many happening now. Hearing you sing at this length made me think, oh man, there could be something great, but I don't know. Is there a dream musical biopic?
Got a couple. To me, it's also just about the interesting life and like being able to tell that story correctly. And but before they did George and Tammy, that was one of my favorites. Her story and him, that love story, that to me, that was just, that was one of my that's one of my favorites. I think Dusty Springfield is a really interesting story.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And people don't know a lot about her. And she's one of my favorites. And she was very shy. She had a lot of stage fright and really fascinating woman. I think struggled with being open about her sexuality. And I think could be a very powerful movie. Ultimate is Stevie. And that would be like, my family might disown me if I ever got a chance to play Stevie because they'd be like, can we not go method? There'd be a lot. I'd be like, I would probably go way too far into that character. But I think for all girls who love rock, Stevie's like just our number one.
I spent some time with her. It was unforgettable. She's amazing.
She's the best. Also, like her whole life experience and the music thing. And let me tell you something, I've been getting really into when Kristen McPhee died. I started listening to her solo album and got into all the songs she wrote. Again, like I don't think anyone that isn't like a big music lover knows what an incredible songwriter. And I couldn't stop listening to her vinyl that I got the solo vinyl. And then I just was thinking about Fleetwood Mac, like that whole journey from like before Stevie to after Stevie to that relationship and her and Lindsay, like it's like a trilogy. And so to me, that's just like the ultimate rock and roll story.
We could brainstorm on this all day, but
I know.
I don't want to take too much of your time.
I'm happy that it was you who is interviewing me. So thanks for taking the time.
No, I really, really enjoyed the album.
Can I ask what your favorite track was?
My absolute favorite, I might have to go for Glorious just because it's so big. I really liked, actually I made a list of it. I really like Love Ain't Easy.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. I like the 90s a lot.
That's one of my favorites too. The 90s, it's so funny because I was going to change some of those lyrics because I was like, I know what this is about. And then I was like, no, I'm not changing these lyrics. Cause it's, for me, it's two things, and I'm not gonna go into, I don't like telling people what it is, cause then they can't create their own relationship to it. Like Glorious, I think if I shared the real story, wouldn't have this, it would ruin other people's connection to the song. Not that everybody would listen to what in length, like who listens to anybody anymore? Some of us do, but most people are like reading a headline and scrolling. Yeah. But I don't want to go into the depth of it, but the 90s, it started as a 90s like pop song. It was very like grunge 90s and it wasn't working. The song wasn't working. And then Linda was like, it's not working. And this was in the beginning. Weird. This was like in the beginning sketches of everything. And we stripped it down to a more simple kind of Lindsey Buckingham picking style. And this is early, but I kept the name 90s because the whole purpose of it was like, I feel like there was a different time. And the 90s is one of my favorite eras of music because people they were anti-establishment. They were like, this isn't working. We're going to speak out against establishment. We're going to be rebellious. We're going to be naughty and we're going to run away anything that is like status quo. You don't get to tell me how to live, who I am. And as artists, you had Rage Against the Machine. Everyone was like, it was a big fuck you to the man time. We are living in the polar opposite time right now. And it's a little bit of the lyrics could be about relationship, could be about politics, but it's a little bit of that for me. It's almost like a reflection of where we're at right now. Like it might be time to run in a different direction. And that's that I'm happy to share. And then as I do when I like to write, I also like to write. It can also be a relationship, like singular.
Fair enough.
Did that register to you?
It did. I have one more, which was there at any point did the spirit of Penny Lane descend on this album?
The spirit of Penny Lane descends on everything in my life because I was Penny Lane. I think that Cameron hired me because I love music. And then I think that the easiest thing to be able to see in that movie was how much I love music. And that was easy for me. Like all the other stuff was much more challenging, but the love of music and the world and like sitting in it, that's just like how I've always been. Corduroys, peasant tops. That started at 14 and I never looked back.
And that's our show. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, subscribe to Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us 5 stars and a nice review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because that's always appreciated. But as always, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.